In a murder investigation, you never know what kind of clue will lead to a break, right? Well, in this case, it was a flock of birds. An officer noticed them circling over and over above a secluded spot next to a Florida canal. And since he'd just been at a bloody crime scene that happened to be missing some bodies just less than a mile away, he decided to investigate. Stacked on top of each other like firewood were Megan Brown, her parents, Margaret and Greg, and her new boyfriend, Nick Leonard. But Megan's 4-year-old son, Tristan, and his father, Adam Matos, nowhere to be seen. And as grisly as the scene was, they had no idea how sickening this case would get. Let's start at the end, September 5th, 2014, on the 18th floor of a hotel in downtown Tampa, Florida. A SWAT team rescued 4-year-old Tristan from his father, Adam. He was in shock. Tristan, not Adam. Adam said goodbye to mental health long ago. And over the past week, he did things in front of his son that no one should ever have to witness, all in the name of love. Is there anything more dangerous? Back in 2010 in Pennsylvania, a mutual friend introduced 18-year-old track star beauty Megan Brown to a handsome jailbird, 19-year-old aspiring DJ Adam Matos. Now, he was a local criminal whose convictions include assault, trespassing, theft, harassment of a previous girlfriend, and more. But it's like weirdly hard to resist a good-looking bad boy, and it was lust at first sight, albeit short-lived. The two of them were together for only a couple of months before Megan went back to her longtime boyfriend. So, how does a whirlwind romance end in blood, betrayal, and murder 4 times over? Because their improbable pairing produced a baby boy, Tristan. So, since they were new parents, Megan and Adam decided to give their relationship another try. This was no fairy tale. Things between them could be described as rocky or on again, off again at best. Their son Tristan's diagnosis of autism added another level of stress. But the entire family, including Adam and Megan's parents, Greg and Margaret, were determined to provide Tristan with a safe and stable home life. Her parents even opened up their Pennsylvania farmhouse to Adam so he, Megan, and Tristan could live there with them and be a family. Now, by the time Tristan was 4, Greg and Margaret decided to retire to Florida. That's so Margaret could be close enough to look after her aging parents and, because Florida. And they convinced Megan to move with them and to bring Tristan. But how could they separate Adam from his son? So Adam tried to convince Megan to stay in Pennsylvania with him, where they could raise Tristan together. But the promise of a fresh start in the Sunshine State made for a more persuasive argument, and Greg and Margaret offered him a compromise. Adam could move with them to Florida. That way, father and son wouldn't be separated and Adam could get on his feet with a new start. But here's the thing. Adam and Megan were meant to be platonic co-parents, nothing more. And to say the Florida experiment proved to be a bust would be a massive understatement. So while Greg and Margaret built their retirement home in Hudson, about 20 miles from Tampa, they rented a home on the canal large enough for all 5 of them. But the constant tension was palpable, stemming from Adam's work instability, chronic isolation, addiction to video games, and the constant flare-ups between him and Megan. Megan's step-grandmother described him as a necessary evil, and Megan herself was more than ready to move on from Adam. She was waitressing in a popular restaurant and building a new circle of friends, acquaintances, and a love interest, a guy she really liked named Nicholas Leonard. Awkward. On August 28th, 2014, Adam was at home with Tristan. He was letting his imagination run wild about where Megan was and who she was with. And wherever she had been that night, she didn't make it home until the wee hours of the morning. And there was Adam waiting for her, knife in hand. Minutes later, Megan was on the phone with 911, crying hysterically about Adam putting a knife to her neck and trying to kill her. Terrified and bleeding from her hands in front of her frightened son, she told police he had threatened to come back and finish what he started. It was no idle threat. Over the next 90 minutes, he called her 65 times. Over the course of the day, she fielded 135 more psychotic calls from him. Now, out of her mind with fear, Megan reached out to her new beau, Nicholas. He was quick to grab his gun and head over to the Browns' home to protect her. And then surprisingly, all the fussing, fighting, and crying disappeared. The Brown house was more peaceful than it had ever been, but it wasn't until a few days later when a Brown family relative grew concerned that they hadn't been able to reach anyone for days. A police welfare check uncovered a horrific smell of death and decay emanating from the empty house. Bloody blankets were crumpled on the garage floor next to the family's van. Inside the van was blood, maggots, and a shovel. And then a quarter-mile down the road was the missing family and Nicholas. So what horrors did Tristan see? It seems that when Nicholas came over, Adam was lurking around watching. The only family member still to come home was Margaret. When she pulled in, he was waiting in the garage with a hammer. He left her body where she fell in a pool of blood. And then he went upstairs and immediately attacked Nicholas with the same hammer, hitting him over and over almost a dozen times. Megan ran to her dad's room where he was frantically trying to get one of his rifles, but by now Adam had Nicholas's gun. Greg didn't stand a chance. And then he turned the gun on Megan, shooting her in the eye. And the only people left alive were Adam and Tristan, and the boy had witnessed all the carnage, but the nightmare wasn't over. He left his 4-year-old son alone with the bodies while he made a run to Walmart to buy a shovel and cleaning supplies. It looks like he made a feeble attempt to dig a grave in the backyard, but the rocky, hard soil wouldn't loosen, and he gave up pretty quickly. For the next several days, he and Tristan lived among the corpses with the horrible stench of blood and decaying flesh. And as just bananas as it sounds, it looks like Adam tried to act like everything was normal as living in a horror movie could be. He ordered pizzas. He went over and hung out with the neighbors. He went out for drinks. He ran errands, leaving Tristan alone at the house with the bodies every time, by the way. And then, get this, he started selling their things on Craigslist. He even sold their dogs. And then when he couldn't ignore the persistent phone calls from their worried family and friends any longer, he loaded their bodies into the van and stacked them in a ditch nearby. And then he escaped with Tristan to the hotel in Tampa, where they were found a couple days later. Now, once in police custody, he remained calm. He didn't even let on that he knew about the quadruple homicide, not at first. His original story was that he had a brief argument with Megan, and Margaret told him to leave, and that was it. So while the police were still processing the grisly scene at the Browns' house, they arrested him for domestic violence, stemming from Megan's 911 call a week earlier. But when they asked Adam if he knew someone to call and watch his son while he was locked up, he made it seem like, as far as he knew, the Brown family was still alive and able to take custody of Tristan. He spun the next version of his story after the police had identified all the bodies and had a better idea what and who they were dealing with. Adam offered to help with the investigation. He threw blame at a former girlfriend of Nicholas's who was jealous over his new relationship with Megan. And as flimsy as it sounded, it was still worth checking out. After all, they didn't know for sure that Adam was their guy. But while his crazy ex-girlfriend story did have some merit, apparently there was a girl with a history of stalking and intimidation, but she was no killer. Plus, she had an airtight alibi. The only one left standing was Adam. And on the stand, at trial, he confessed. Sort of. He claimed the massacre was self-defense. In his version of his story, he had returned to the house where Megan, Greg, and Nicholas were just to get his things. And then he stumbled on Nicholas and Megan in their bedroom. Nicholas, armed with a pistol, started to attack Adam. And at that point, he said he had to defend himself from Nicholas, whose hands were like wrapping around his throat, trying to choke him. So they struggled, and Adam was able to wrestle the gun away without being shot himself. But instead of shooting Nicholas in fear for his life, he struck him in the head 20 plus times with a hammer. Then he took the gun, went into Greg's room to kill him. And he claimed he was able to shoot Greg before Greg could shoot him because Greg's gun jammed on him twice when he pulled the trigger. Then he shot Megan because she wanted him dead. He said she was screaming, "Shoot him, Dad." So Adam shot her through the eye. So now the only one left was Margaret, who just happened to be returning home from work. Adam said he picked up that bloody hammer and caught her in the garage after she parked her car so she couldn't attack him first because, as he said, she was obviously in on the attack, so he had to bludgeon her to death the same way he did Nicholas. And if you're curious about how he explained living in the house of horrors with his son, well, he put it up to shock. Well, it certainly was shocking. I'll give him that. He was found guilty of murder, and he came within one vote of getting the death penalty, but ultimately the jury settled for life in prison without parole. And as for his son, Tristan, that poor baby, he is living with a family member, and dear God, hopefully getting all the therapy he needs to recover so he is not freaking traumatized for life. And that is your recap. Thank you so much for watching. If you like getting all the crime in half the time as much as we like bringing it to you, please don't go away. Stick around. There is another recap coming up right now. We're going to see you there.